Mr. Bell has been the president of UGI Utilities since September 2020. Mr. Bell joined UGI Utilities in 2013 as Vice President of Engineering and Operations Support, a role he held until 2017. Prior to joining UGI Utilities, Mr. Bell held senior operating and engineering positions at AGL Resources and Nicor Gas. Mr. Bell also serves this year as the chair of NGA's Board of Directors, and it's my pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you for being with us.
Really glad to be here, Alana. So nice to see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd, some current faces and people from past lives. So great opportunity to reconnect.
Thank you. So this is you would think I'd know how to use the mic because this is the fifth time I've done this. This is our fifth kind of fireside chat with utility executives from the Northeast region. So the last 5 times we've been talking to executives and kind of covering either the New England area or the New York area. So this time we got the pleasure of talking about issues in Pennsylvania, but compared to the rest of the region, Pennsylvania is taking a fairly different approach, I would say, to the clean energy evolution or transition, depending on how you might talk about that. Some states like New York and Massachusetts are attempting to put a time horizon on the use of gas, but Pennsylvania is certainly different. Would you please share the direction the state and UGI specifically is taking in regards to continuing or expanding the use of natural gas?
Sure, thanks. Maybe to give a little bit of a background that provides perspective into that question, let me first tell you a few facts about our company, UGI Utilities. So we are a gas and electric company. We have about 700,000 gas customers in PA, about 60,000 electric customers, 13,000 miles of pipe, and our rate base is about $4 billion. So that's where I'm coming from. With that, about 1,700 employees. And we've been investing very heavily in pipeline replacement for the last 10 plus years. That's what brought me to the company, was the replacement program. And we're investing so heavily in PA because we believe there's a really long future, right? When you make significant investments in infrastructure, those are long-lived assets, right? We're looking at these assets will be in the ground long after all of us are gone. They'll be there serving future generations, and you need to have that confidence to put that kind of capital into service. So with that, a little bit of background on PA. So there's a political strategist that characterized Pennsylvania probably 15, 20 years ago, and I think it still stands. So the characterization of Pennsylvania is you have Philadelphia on the east side of PA, you have Pittsburgh on the west, and then in between those two is Alabama. And I think that still holds up. And that influences how policy shows up in PA. For the record, my company serves a lot of the Alabama part of PA. So we have the Marcellus Shale. Remember, Pennsylvania is the second largest gas producer in the country, only behind Texas. So that makes us unique. While some of our neighbors in the region are busy disassembling power plants, we're putting them up. There was an announcement just this past week regarding a plant called Homer City that's out towards the western part of the state. This is a 4,500 gigawatt facility, all right? That's a big deal. So that's taking an old coal-fired plant and converting it over to natural gas. And you see a lot of that going on in the state. We've had a number of those on our utility system. So that trend is about played out, but you definitely see repurposing of former power plants onto gas from prior fuels.
What about on the residential customer side? Are you seeing conversions still? I mean, Pennsylvania is still, compared to other northeastern states, they still have some population growth, whereas in New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, you've seen population decline. What about Pennsylvania?
Yeah, population growth is it's regional, right?
Okay.
So in some parts of our territory, you definitely see it. Lehigh Valley, Harrisburg, Lancaster. We're in a lot of this, what we call the second tier cities in the state. But we have a pretty strong growth profile, I'll say relatively speaking. So as a utility, we're growing at about 1% per year in customer count. That doesn't sound like much, but for a utility, that's a pretty big deal. So that's about 12,000 customers a year. It's still legal to add customers in PA, by the way, unlike some other places not too far from here. And
Or literally here.
yeah, I was trying to be nicer. But we had those customers like clockwork. So 12,000 a year. And that really doesn't vary with the economic cycle. So it comes in two parts. We have about half of that coming from residential new construction in some of the more urbanized areas is where we see that. And then we have an ongoing trend of fuel oil conversions. So believe it or not, we have a statistic that there are something on the order of 200,000 fuel oil prospects within 150 feet of our gas mains. So as you know, yeah, that's going to play out for years to come, right? That's a very powerful trend. And you know, with that, if you look at PA, the median household income is about $74,000 per year. So note the word median. So about half above, half below is what that means. And if you look at fuel oil prices, like there's a lot of discussion about affordability of energy these days. And we watch what we call the natural gas to fuel oil spread. Basically, what's the price difference between those two fuels? So picture that customer in PA, or that prospective customer in PA that's on fuel oil today. They've got $74,000 household income or less through much of our service territory. And with that, we approximate a savings. It depends on the price spread, but it's between $1,000 and $2,000 per day per house, or per year per household. That's a big deal. That's a very political force that gives us that long horizon, right? We get a lot of people that go to their elected officials that say, how can we get gas in our neighborhood? Help us do that. I'll add, again, the Marcellus Shale in our backyard. We have access to low-cost gas under our distribution system, and you know, we're very busy producing that gas in PA. Statewide, there's about 320,000 jobs tied to the oil and gas industry in some form or another. So when you look at that political landscape that I talked about, oil and gas is a pretty big force in PA, especially gas. And as a result of that, that really informs policy around the longevity of gas and the reinvestment in infrastructure that's occurring in our state.
Maybe we could stick with the affordability issue a little bit, because coming out of this past winter, which was colder than the last winter, but not a significantly cold winter, the issue of affordability was a really big deal across the Northeast. And I think, you've talked a little bit about the price differential and the opportunity, certainly in Pennsylvania, for customers. But how do you think maybe as an industry we should be addressing the calls for increasing affordability? Maybe touch on what do you think some of the causes are, and what should policymakers and regulators be doing?
Sure, that's a complex issue. And when we talk about affordability, I think there's an important part of that. Let's talk about the relative affordability, right? So how do the different costs of different energy sources compare to one another? I think that's really the point of focus. That being said, so here's what's going on in our jurisdiction. I think this plays out throughout the entirety of the country in large part. So there's a tremendous force around aging infrastructure. And you see that in water, you see that in gas, you see that in electric. It's playing out simultaneously across all of those fronts. So all of these different types of utilities are simultaneously reinvesting in infrastructure. The water people, they have mandates on lead pipes and PFAS, the forever chemicals, right? So they're busy plowing in new pipes so that they can meet EPA mandates. The electric people, it's all about electric reliability and how are they going to serve load growth. Gas investment, it's all about safety and reliability and emissions reduction. So from the consumer point of view, these folks are being assaulted at all levels on their utility bills, and they're seeing their costs rise as we're catching up from this, decades-long trend of needing to invest more in infrastructure. So it's a very powerful force, and our customers are definitely feeling that. So what we try to do in PA is we have aging infrastructure as well. So we've been replacing bare steel. We're almost done, by the way. Our team will be out of the bare steel business a year from now. So that's been a decade-long trend in the making. I think I said bare steel, I meant cast iron. We'll be out of the cast iron business within the next year. We have a long time left on bare steel. We'll be done by 2041, and there's some new entrants coming along. Plastic will be part of our investment portfolio as well. So as we're looking at the size of what needs to be done, what we try to do is we go to our regulators in advance, and Pennsylvania has this mechanism. It's called a quote-unquote long-term infrastructure improvement plan. We affectionately call that our LTIP. And what that does, it gives us a view ahead for what the next 5 years of infrastructure look like. And we get the commitment from the commission up front. We have an agreement. What should we be doing? What assets should we be replacing? What amount of CapEx should go into the ground? And with that pre-approval, that effectively helps set the stage for the bulk of the request that shows up in our rate cases. So there's clear signaling between the necessary investment, and it's more than signaling. It implicitly is tied to the rate case request because we already have approval on that CapEx. So as a utility, we try to have the visibility to what investments need to be made, and that goes hand in hand with the affordability and the predictability of the impact on customers' bills. Now with that, we're investing a lot of money. Our company does about $500 million in CapEx in PA per year. It doesn't necessarily sound like as much as it used to, but on a base of $4 billion, right, that moves our rate base almost about 10% per year. So that turns into a bill effect of about 10% per year. So that has to be balanced in, close work with the commission, with the statutory advocates to make sure that we're investing at a tolerable rate and delivering the benefits that we promised, safety and reliability for that amount of investment.
Thank you. Maybe we shifting gears a little bit. Maybe we could talk a little bit about safety. The safety of our workforce and the public is obviously of the utmost importance. Over the years, our industry, has had its share of pipeline safety challenges. How does UGI and the industry as a whole learn from these incidents and improve? Based on your experiences, what are some key takeaways and advice that you would offer to others to further enhance pipeline safety?
Sure. Safety is it's a fundamental topic for us. And a lot of times, I get caught up in this sometimes. You'll hear various companies or people talk about, they'll say, safety is our number one priority. That's good. That's a good start. But I take a little bit of issue with that. It's maybe a technicality, but in my view, priorities tend to change, right? We've got a certain set of priorities 1 year, 1 week. You may have a different priority later on. I view safety, and we try to drive this at UGI, it's much more fundamental. This is something that stays with us. It's enduring. It doesn't change over time. I described safety as foundational to our business, right? If you think about this from a customer's point of view, if you're a prospective customer of a utility company and you're worried about the safety of the product that they're going to deliver to you, are you going to let them attach a meter to your home? Probably not if you're concerned about the safety of that product. So we have to get safety right. Safety's fundamental to customer trust. That customer trust is fundamental to our business results. You can't get the business results without a foundation of safety as a starting point. We're going so far as to try to simplify some of the discussion around safety at UGI. So we have a stand that we're taking. Like a stand is like you're lying in the sand. And look at this as like a lighthouse, a beacon. So it's a riff on what we've seen in other places, but basically our stand is that everyone and everything is always safe, right? That's pretty basic. And you think about where safety shows up, it shows up in driving, it shows up in employee safety, it shows up in our infrastructure, it shows up in quality. The quality of construction directly affects safety. Safety is in everything we do. So everyone and everything is always safe, bottom line. That's what we work towards. It's a journey, it never ends, and we keep at it. A little bit beyond that. So the other view that I'd have is an industry, so outside of my company walls, and this affects everyone here, is in our line of work, when you look across companies, if there's an incident at one company, it's really an incident for all of industry. It's been that way for a long time, and it's really important that we look at things that way. That's where organizations like NGA are so important, because it gives us the opportunity to share experiences and lessons learned across companies. It provides that forum for doing so. Now, recently, it was within the last few weeks, there was a PHMSA advisory bulletin, right? And this advisory bulletin was around pipeline safety management systems, PSMS. You've probably heard of that. Here's a place where NGA has been way ahead, and it's been helping all of our members out in terms of helping provide guidance and tools on how to implement the PSMS framework. Part of those tools includes things like, how do you measure your safety culture? How do you build and reinforce a safety culture over time? And it also gets into things like lessons learned. How do you share what's happened at one company or what's helped one operator out? The lessons learned from an incident, how does that translate over to other companies? And collectively, how do you implement continuous improvement to prevent those reoccurrences in the future? So that's a really big deal. Now, I'd be a little bit remiss not to mention, in the spirit of sharing lessons learned, maybe some recent news. Just a few days ago, and this affects my own company. And I'd encourage you to look at the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB. They have a website, really easy to find. And you'll see they have a recent report out on an incident that occurred at UGI involving our company. And there's a couple themes in that. I'll hit two of them today, but it's a pretty healthy report. And a few things to think about. Let's talk about risk for a moment. So risk, a lot of you know, risk is the product of probability times consequence, right? And a lot of what we do day to day in infrastructure replacement, we're working on the probability side, right? We're replacing leak-prone pipes, we're investing capital to upgrade our systems. That's how you address probability. Then there's the consequence side of risk, right? What happens when something goes wrong? And I'll point out there's a few aspects that show up in the NTSB report addressing consequences. So one of them is around public awareness, right? How do you connect with the stakeholders adjacent to your infrastructure? Maybe they're your customers, maybe they're your neighbors. Maybe they're the people working in a plant that you serve. And how do you communicate to them the hazards around natural gas? How to identify an abnormal condition? How do you make sure they know what to do in that situation? That's a theme in the NTSB report. There's another theme, and this is one of those themes that will go across the entirety of industry, and that's around methane detectors. Again, here you've got a situation where the probability has occurred. You've had a release. Now, how do you mitigate the consequences? And the theme here is, are there technologies that can alert people to the existence of a leak and inform them that they need to evacuate or take other appropriate actions? There's some pretty far-reaching recommendations to that effect. I'd encourage you all to read the report because it will affect your company at some point, as it has affected UGI. And I'd also note that these topics are explored further in the sessions here later today. I'd encourage you to participate there.
And yeah, just to plug for that, I think first session in Track A is on natural gas detectors. So if you are interested in that topic, I encourage you to sit in that session. So thank you, Hans, for that. Maybe I'll shift gears a little bit, maybe going back to policy. Looking to the regional and national regulatory energy landscape, Pennsylvania is in an interesting place right now. Your public utility chair, Stephen DeFrank, is now the head of NARUC, which, if you don't know, is the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, Subcommittee on Natural Gas. You've also had an ongoing conversation in your state about the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and it continues to be a contentious topic in the Commonwealth. How do you see the landscape in Pennsylvania kind of informing the national conversation? And as you said, really ground zero for natural gas development too over the last decade.
Sure. So I mentioned the politics earlier, and that's pretty important way to look at our state. Pennsylvania is really viewed as a proxy on the whole country because it brings together a lot of very differing opinions. And if you look at states, traditionally red, blue, Pennsylvania is a bright purple. So like in elections and so forth, generally the way that Pennsylvania goes, it's the way the country goes. And that holds true in policy as well, and in energy policy in particular. So the Pennsylvania Commission has been very involved in NARUC, the Regulatory Commissioners Association, over the years. Pennsylvania took a leading role back in the day when there was the nationwide mandate on cast iron in terms of get cast iron out of the systems, help modernize infrastructure. PA led the pack there. And I would imagine on the topics of methane detection, methane detectors, and now vintage plastic, I would imagine that what happens in PA will be closely followed by other states and potentially help lead federal policy as well. Beyond infrastructure, there's a few other things going on in PA. So a lot of news in our state on data centers and on power generation. So the two are pretty inextricably linked. And recently there have been some really big announcements. I mentioned Homer City. If you're familiar with the 3 Mile Island plant, that was a nuclear plant that has somewhat of a reputation. And that plant is in the process of being recommissioned for the purpose of hosting a Microsoft data center. Up in Northeast PA, there's a nuclear plant known as the Susquehanna plant, and that is going to host an Amazon data center. So two very power-hungry customers in those facilities, and the draw on the power grid has some significant policy implications to Pennsylvania, to our PJM independent system operator, And again, regionally, as PA is an exporter of power to many of the Northeast gas states. So there's a healthy discussion in our state on what's called the resource adequacy that goes hand in hand with data centers and power gen. Resource adequacy is it's a polite way to say we're running out of power, and it goes beyond that. It also goes to the mix of what is in the power stack, right? Increasingly over the past few years, the power stack of resources has had an increasing proportion of renewables, and gas is seen as needing to take a larger share of that stack for the dispatchability and reliability that are really important when we have events like Winter Storm Elliott a few years ago and the cold spell this past season. So the policy implications of those matters are front and center in PA, and how those ultimately get resolved, I would expect that those implications would show up in other states.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that, because I do think that it's certainly something NGA has been focused on, and certainly part of the national conversation, this electric gas coordination and the interconnectedness, and really throughout the country, certainly in the Northeast, PJM, New England, you're seeing the electric grid increasingly dependent on natural gas, but at the same time constrained to move natural gas in certain places. So I guess how, as an industry, should we be thinking about this and, and preparing ourselves for what's next?
Sure, a couple comments there. Alana's very modest, right? So she has a role in what she just spoke about in terms of Alana and the Northeast Gas Association have a supply task force that our people have been coordinating for a long time. It was really an initiative before its time. And what really brought this electric gas coordination to the front was this Winter Storm Elliott that I mentioned a few years ago. So in that particular storm, this occurred over a holiday period, as they tend to do, right? This one, things seemed to reach epic proportions. I remember that Christmas Eve night very vividly. We got our team on the phone. We needed to start calling our customers in the evening of Christmas Eve, ask them to start dialing their thermostats down so that the gas could be conserved, not only for local purposes, but also we needed to be a good neighbor and let some of that gas that flows through Pennsylvania make its way east to other jurisdictions and to power generators, because there was a regional crisis showing up. That's generally the background on the situation. So NGA has this forum. I was able to participate in this year as well, but Alana does the heavy lifting on facilitating this forum. And it brings together a consortium of gas producers, of pipelines, of LDCs, of LNG peaking companies, and it enables a greater degree of integration to understand what's the current situation, what's going on going into that cold spell that's about to happen, what's the situational awareness among each company, so that we can preemptively try to take actions to avoid the situation that we were in a few years ago. This year, very fortunate and due to a lot of the good work and the lessons learned from Winter Storm Elliott, we avoided those types of situations. And as we went through that, I'd note that other regional gas associations were watching NGA to see how we handled this situation. And this is a place where, again, lessons learned and policy implications from the Northeast, I'm pretty sure those will find their ways into other parts of the country where they benefit from what we've been doing pretty well here.
Thank you, Hans. Maybe we just have time for one more question, and then we'll take a question or two from the audience if there is one, because we're coming up on the hour. Maybe to end things on a positive note for our industry, what gives you hope for the future, either in PA or generally for your company?
So what gives me hope for the future? Look at this filled room here, all right? So we have a lot of challenges, and with every one of those challenges, there's an opportunity. I look at our own company, I think we're coming up on, we have an anniversary, I believe it's 150 years.
Wow.
Did you hear all those service vendors earlier, all the vendor community? They've been in business 100 years, 90 some years, solving problems for decades, right? That's what our industry is known for, right? We have some challenges today. Guess what? There'll be new challenges tomorrow. But we have a really bright, resilient, problem-solving, forward-looking workforce that will get us through this. The same way that the people before us got us through the issues they were facing, all of the folks we're looking out here at today, I'm confident they'll do the same, and we're going to be in business a very long time. We're not going away anytime soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Hans. I think we have time for maybe one or two questions. If anybody would like to, we have a mic right up here in the front if anybody has a question or two. Or I guess Christian can run it around. Any questions for Hans this morning? Or comments? Quiet group? Oh, right here in front, Christian.
So, current administration,
If you just want to wait 1 sec. Thank you.
just what's your take on the current administration, direction it's going, impact on the industry?
So relative to the current administration, and I'll go back even to the prior administration, the challenge that we have in industry is we're in the long game, all right? So there were some very different policies just a few months ago, and now we've got a very new set of policies, right? And being in the long game, you kind of have to look at what are the trends that are going to occur over time and how do we address those trends. Right now, I think there's a little bit of a race to try to take advantage of the current situation, get assets built, make sure that we can perhaps reinvigorate some pipeline construction, invest in some physical assets that if policy changes the other way in a few years, those are assets that we know that we'll benefit from and we're going to need. So what we try to do in our company is look to the long haul, right? There's gonna be zigs and zags, and you can't react to every one of those left and right oscillations. You really have to look at what do things look like for the next 10, 20, 30 years. I mentioned when you invest in capital in your plant, you're looking at a 40-year life. So if somebody's brand new in the industry today, if this is your first conference, what you're building today, right, your company's banking on that being part of their plant for a very long time when they make that investment decision. The length of your career, that's the interval of time that we're measuring with every dollar that we spend. So I think that the answer is, relative to the current administration, okay, that's what we're working with today, but let's look beyond what those immediate effects are and really make our investments and policies based off of a long haul. I'm personally convinced, if you didn't pick up on the theme through the discussion, that gas is going to be part of our energy in the United States for decades to come. And, we're not going anywhere soon, at least in PA.
Thank you. One more. Take one more question. Thank you.
No, Hans, I just want to thank you because I'm downstream. I'm a pipeline operator in New York City, right? So with the storm Emily and we were all on the phone most of the night. And I'm also a resident of customer of NatGrid on the Long Island way out there. So my house stayed warm, and we had gas in the pipe for the whole storm. So I just want to thank you for making sure that happened. And I never looked at it that way. We knew all the trouble, but I never had to face it.
Well, we were thinking about you in a little bit of a way, and so glad that you saw that. But yeah, I mean, look at it this way. I'll go back to the incident comment. If you ran out of supply in New York, okay, well, it's maybe not my local problem, and it might not affect all of us, but that would be a big blemish on industry. We'd still be relighting from that event, right? And that's the kind of thing that we have to make sure collectively doesn't happen, because we're the industry of reliability, right? That would be a horrible signal relative to what values we promise to deliver to our customers. So glad it all worked out.
Thank you, Bob. We got one question in the middle here.
Yeah, I'm in a unique situation. I'm a member of the Commonwealth UGI ratepayer as well, but we also service UGI both on the energy services side and the utility side from an engineering perspective. But with Homer City and with Susquehanna and 3 Mile, although those are kind of different situations, the concern in the communities now are, as these, specifically on the power gen side, right? What's going to happen from a rate perspective, moving forward. And, there are concerns, especially within my own community, about some of these facilities being brought on specifically on the data center side. And I know that's a little bit more electrical, but eventually it's going to have to get fed by natural gas. I think we all understand that. So just, I don't know if you have an idea of the horizon or, what's eventually going to be approved, whether it's on the PGM side or just overall capital projects.
Well, there's certainly a race that's occurring today, right? And that race is who can secure the sites that have the available power supply and getting those locations locked up. So in our service territory at UGI, I'll note there's a lot of communities who want these sites, all right? So let me go back to that comparison of the state where you've got two relatively wealthy population centers, and then in the middle of the state, there's a lot of communities that are still in decline from the turn down in coal. And a lot of those communities would welcome industrial type development that feeds into the tax base, provides jobs, et cetera. There's definitely some community benefits to those sites. And we've had a good bit of outreach on behalf of some of those distressed communities, trying to help cultivate that development. There definitely is a patchwork. Some communities would welcome the development. Others, generally more economically better off, are a little more standoffish, akin to what you're seeing down in Data Center Alley in Virginia. So it's very situational. The data centers are certainly driving the power demand and certainly the forecast, but keep in mind, prior to the whole data center phenomenon, there was this wave of coal plant retirements that had been occurring. And to a large extent, that's played out, but there's still a few big ones. Down in Baltimore, you see some of that. One of the things that I like to look at on those really, really cold days of the year is you look at the marginal power price between different areas, right? Baltimore, where plants are still being retired, there's a chronic power shortage there, right? Like the lights are at risk of going off. And you see prices spike in Baltimore. You look up this way into the Northeast, prices are $100 a megawatt higher than what you see just a couple hundred miles away down in my neck of the woods. So those plants are very necessary to help bring down power prices for the ratepayers to benefit from. Otherwise, the forecast for future electric rates is very challenging. And if we think we have low-income issues today, without the next wave of power development, those low-income affordability challenges for electricity are going to be exacerbated beyond what we see today. I hope that helps.
Well, Hans, I want to thank you for being here today, and thank you everyone for attending, and a round of applause thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.